Hello, everyone. On behalf of Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage INTACH and the INTACH Conservation Institutes, I extend a very warm welcome to our distinguished speaker in Cotte and everyone who has joined us for today's talk in the Conservation Insights 2020 lecture series. I'm Dr. Padma Rohila, Director, ICI Delhi. Now to introduce our speaker, Sabine Cotte, since 1990, has worked for museums, galleries, and private collectors in France, Australia, and Southeast Asia. She is the cultural conservation expert for UNESCO since 1997, focusing on Southeast Asia. She is an honorary fellow, University of Melbourne, Faculty of Arts, Grimwade Center for Cultural Materials Conservation, professional member of ICOM-CC, IIC, and AICCM. She's born and trained in France and holds degrees in conservation from French Institute of Conservation of Artworks, IFROA, International Center for Conservation in Rome, Ecrum, and a PhD from University of Melbourne. She is involved in conservation awareness and communities involvement in the care of works of art, particularly of living heritage. She's come up with a handbook of preventive conservation for caretakers of lakangs in Bhutan, published in 2000, and also developed content for fundraising material for the promotion of sustainable conservation with international exchange and women's and career empowerment in the Shekhawati region, Rajasthan, India, 2019-2020. Since 2019, she's also involved with the Shekhawati project training workshops in Rajasthan, where the workshops for mural painting conservation in 19th century Havelis in Shekhawati. The title for today's talk is Collections, Communities, and Projects. Preventive conservation in the field needs a strong engagement with the community to be efficient and sustainable. This means recognizing the community needs and identifying the actors who are in charge of the heritage and creating tools that address both these needs and the people's skills. 3 examples showing different contexts and tools: a handbook for temple caretakers in Bhutan, a poster for moving museum collections post-disaster in Nepal, and custom-made working sheets for post-disaster storage of church collections in the Philippines will be discussed based on different conservation assessments and methods. And before I invite Sabine for the talk, may I please request all of you to mute your microphones, type in your questions in the chat box. Those will be taken right at the end of the talk. And please type in your name, email ID, and your organization name. We would like to know who all have joined us today. Thank you, Sabine, for doing this talk. I understand it's quite late in Australia, but you have taken the time out for us. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Padma, for this nice introduction. So I share my screen now. All right, so as Padma said, the title of the talk is Collection, Communities and Project. And so I will be talking about different projects that involve community. As Padma said, you need to involve especially for on-field projects, you really need to work with the community. But to work there, you need to have a method. So there are different methods for that. And these 3 projects use 3 different methods, not really to the book, to the letter, but it's loosely based on these following methods. So the first one is based on the site survey method. The second one on reorg, it's loosely based again, because I know Gail is listening, so now I'm feeling wary. And the third one is based on loosely based again on the preservation needs assessment, which is a method of assessment that we use a lot in Australia. So this will be the 3 projects I'll be talking about: the Handbook for Preventive Conservation in Bhutan, the Ecrum capacity building workshop in Nepal, which I did with Aparna Tandon from Ecrum and Heba Elmi from Egypt, and the APTCAN Forum Workshop Philippine. APTCAN is Asia Pacific, can't remember, Conservation Cultural Asia Network at the end. I mean, there was a complicated acronym, but it's something about conservation of contemporary art and in Asia Pacific. About this need to work with the community, I would really urge you to check as well Dr. Gurmeet Sangarai and Dr. Savya Sachi project that I heard in Sanjeda initiative that he recently did on the Mentoring Young Conservators initiative, and they gave a fantastic talk about the mural paintings conservation project in the Krishna temple in Cotte. It wasn't only the mural paintings, but the whole temple. And that was done really completely in collaboration with the community. And that won an award, UNESCO award. And Dr. Sachi is a sociologist, and Dr. Rai is a heritage architect, and she runs the Cultural Resource Conservation Initiative. So that's another thing to look at. So I'll start with the Handbook of Preventive Conservation for Dzongs and Lakan. That was a project that ran from 1996 to 2000. First, you can see my arrow. Yeah, this is where Bhutan is. Most of Indian people listening tonight will know that, but other people may not. So it's a little country just between Tibet and Nepal and India on the other side. And it's a landlocked country. And the characteristic religious building in this country are these huge monastery. It's a fortress and a monastery, but it's also the administration of the region, and it's called the Dzong. And the Lakang is a temple. And the Dzong has, as you can see, a sort of perimeter. The plan is with the central tower, and the central tower are where the Lakangs are, where the temples are. And around, in all the buildings around, half of it is the monastery and the other half is the administration buildings. And this is what an internal courtyard looks like in a Dzong. So this is a living religious heritage. People inhabit it and they work in it. And here you can see the little monks having lunch at lunchtime in the courtyard. And you can see as well the main room when they have their lessons all day, and sometimes they sleep in there at night. They unroll their mats and they go there. You can see in the temples, pardon me, some tankas who are just sometimes behind the muslin when they're not used or when there is no ceremony. So it's a very living building, and on the other side of the building is the administration, but it's usually less decorated there. It's a country with the agricultural seasons and difficulties of access. So here you can see, for example, this little temple, which is in the Paro Valley, but you need 1 day of walk to go there. So of course, assessing the condition of mural paintings, and it doesn't happen every day. This is one of the most famous temples in Bhutan, Taksang, which is, as you can see, just built on the cliff. It's closer to a, it's closer to a center, but it still requires 2 hours walk to go there. This is a temple, Dumtse Lakang, again in the Paro Valley, and I took the photo in different seasons. This is a rice field just in front of it, and the rice fields, when it's the moment in spring, they get inundated. And here are the women working in the fields, just replanting the rice. So you can see that there is a lot of water around, and that could go in the walls by capillarity. What was the problem there? Of course, we were asked to look at that because there were some problems. So small causes can have very big effects, and capillarity, we're talking about capillary action, humidity, just goes in the walls, and the mortar is made of earth, soil. So little by little, the mortar is dissolved, and this big building, the Dzong, will slowly collapse and fall into the valley. And when you go inside, here you can see cracks, and you can see where the wall starts to fall. And when you have a close-up, you can see there is a difference. I apologize, it's not the best photo, but there is a difference of, at that time, it was about 1 centimeter in between. And you can see that with the images between the two sides of the image. So sometimes people have good intentions, but then they may turn badly. So this is what is a traditional toilet in a Dzong. So it's just in a cantilever. There's a hole here, and well, it's perfectly safe. provided, of course, that you're not having a little walk underneath here at the wrong moment. But then some organization, I can't remember which one, but some NGO a long time ago decided that that would be good to build some toilets in the Dzong. So they did, but then they were never maintained. When there is no follow-up, it could really turn bad very quickly. So inevitably the pipes got blocked. And then you get all that a few years later, where all the wall is getting saturated with water. There is mold developing, the soil is gone, and that will become something really hazardous, and that could be very dangerous. So the heritage in use needs, of course, regular maintenance. And because of all the things I explained to you, when you can't have professionals going there, it's not like a collection where people can go every day or every week to look at it. So the best thing is to turn the users into carers. And for that, you have to really involve them in the care of their heritage. So the users, these little people, for example, I couldn't resist showing that because they do graffiti like everyone does. But the graffitis are different here. There's a little monk. But here, this is a photo to show you that it's the same thing everywhere in every sort of culture. This is a mural painting in Melbourne, the city where I live in. And it's a long mural painting in a train station. And a little bit of it has been sort of embraced or taken by, I think it's a KFC. And the condition was that they take care of the painting. Of course, they don't put anything against it. But if you look carefully, you can see here that they're not doing that. And they've put a sort of a pinning board right into the painting. And another day when I was working there, there was a lot of ladders and things. So if you don't really involve the people in the maintenance and don't explain them why it's important, it doesn't happen. So the Handbook Project had 5 phases. The first one was to lay out the project and find some funding, because that came out after our first visit to Bhutan, and we looked at all the things that I just showed you, and we were asked by the Bhutanese government Ministry of Culture to do something, but they didn't have any money, so it took us a while, but we managed to find funding from the Rolex Award for Enterprise, and we were Associate Laureate in 1996. We got support from Longpo Dagochering, who was the Home Minister, and at that time the Home Minister was the head of the Department of Cultural Affairs as well, and UNESCO as well helped. And we put together a multidisciplinary and multicultural team from Bhutan, France, and Australia. And there was an architect, a painting conservator, myself, and a person from the Department of Cultural Affairs of Bhutan. So we surveyed 17 sites in Bhutan, which ranged from 16th century to 20th century. And we did a field report first, and which was given to the government of Bhutan and was given to UNESCO. And then we created the handbook. It's quite important to do a big report for several reasons. One is when I will show you the handbook in a minute, and the handbook is very simple because it's meant for the community, and it has to be simple because otherwise it wouldn't be used. But if you want to keep finding funding, you have to impress the people who fund you. So you have to give them a report that impresses them. So we gave them a very big field report with a lot of drawings and plans and maps and everything. But we knew that we will really bore the community with that, and they would just say, okay, thank you, put that on the shelf, I never use it. So we made the handbook, and then the next phase was, of course, the distribution of the handbook, and that was done with some workshops inviting the caretakers. But I will take you now into the first phase. So the fieldwork was, this is Meet Singi Dorji, who was working at the Department of Cultural Affairs in Bhutan. This is myself. This is the architect, David Nock, and all our little helpers. So we went absolutely everywhere in the sites. We went on the roof, we went in the cellar, we went under the roof, in the kitchen, and we took the people with us so that we could show us what was the things that interested us and where and what we were looking at and what for. And then we produced the field report. So that was a lot of this mapping and photographs and explaining what was happening, you know, rising damp here and the cracks in the building and what will happen if nothing is done. There was some solutions proposed, just some preventive solution as well proposed. For example, this temple Tamshing, which is in a valley, there is a river here and a slope that goes to the temple. And there's a drain here, but it's it wasn't very deep. And in spring, when the river overflowed, there was a lot of water here. So we just suggested, for example, to plant here in between, to plant some trees that will really suck the water and use it to grow. And that will also protect the temple from the wind as well. This is what you can see inside the temple in the mural paintings. These ones are one of the most famous in Bhutan. They're from the 16th century, and you can see some rough repair, some soot due to the butter lamps. So we did all this mapping to show that, but this is not of much use for the caretakers. That's more aimed at the funders, and that's the government. So we decided that prevention and maintenance were the key points, and we really wanted a low-key approach and develop some basic tools. So that's how we came to the handbook. And the handbook is based on the concept: you identify the issue and you provide low-cost and applicable solutions, because I don't think conservators are here to create problems or to underline problems. If you don't have any solution, it's time to scratch your head and find some, because this is our job. And we recognize the different actors of prevention. I mean, conservators are some actors, but caretakers are as well. And even the people who use the temple can be actors as well. Conservation can be done at every level. So you can create levels of expertise in the prevention. And we made it really user-friendly and practical. This is to show you, this is one of the caretakers, for example. And the caretakers are lay people or they're monk. They're absolutely no awareness in conservation whatsoever or in architecture, nor should they. I mean, they're people from the villages, most of the time. And they're in duty for 1 or 2 years and they get rotated. So that's why we thought, because initially we thought that would be good to have workshops where the caretaker came to the capital, but it's very complicated and it's much easier to move handbooks than to move people in a country like Bhutan. So we just decided the handbook was the way to go. So the handbook works like that. It's minimal text, a lot of images. The main actor is a little monk because we thought so people could identify themselves to that. So you identify the cause with a bit of humor, it never hurts. So this is the water coming and the soil becomes waterlogged, and this is what happens inside. So there's a little bit of text and it's translated into Dzongkha, which is the language in Bhutan. We found out, I mean, we inserted that drawing because we found out that it happened, like sometimes where running water was installed into the dzongs, no one had told the monk that you could turn off the water. So nobody did it in some places. And so it was really getting waterlogged. And then on the next page, you have the solution, which is a drain. And then the water goes there and the wall is safe. Water infiltration, so that's what it does on painting, which are painted with glue, distemper base, so it's water sensitive. So instead of putting a photo, we did put a drawing and saying, if you see that, this may be one of the causes. When there is no flashings here, the water can go in and hurt your painting. So you go on the roof and you have a look. And this is not, again, to ask people to fix everything themselves. It's just to be aware of the problem and call the right person. So if they can fix the roof themselves, that's fine. But if they can't, they call a carpenter or a tiler or whoever is in charge of that. But understanding the problem is already 2/3 of the solution. Because we had done the site survey, we'd been seeing a lot of behaviors as well, which caused problem to the painting. So storage directly against the painting. So you can address the fact that it's in use, and you can provide solution for a safer use, because it's no point saying don't do that, because they need to do that. There isn't much room. So you have to find a better way to do it. So for example, on this page, you say, if you push a furniture against a painting, this is what you will have afterward. So what you do is you put some padding between the furniture and the painting, and then the painting will be safe. Graffitis, of course, I mean, when you're a 6-year-old listening to hours of Sanskrit and religious teaching, you get bored. So what they do, they just do some graffiti. So we did that, say it's not funny to graffiti religious painting. In fact, I mean, to be even more efficient now, I just think we should have put a big cross here. But again, if you have a sort of a funny drawing with a bit of humor, there is more chance that it hits the spot. Integrate the local habits. You can see here all the chili drying on the roof. So what people do, the caretaker does, and these are the holes for the prayer flags masts. So the caretaker goes and put his chili drying and is washing, and then he comes down with his arms full of chili or full of washing and forgets to put the slate back. And then it rains into the temple, sometimes for days on end. So we just say, okay, be careful, just never forget to do that, because it can cause damage into the temple. We introduce notions of maintenance and conservation. So if you dust all the statues regularly, then you won't have a sort of an accumulation and a crust of dust and humidity and everything that which becomes as well some food for the insects or even microorganisms. But however, if you see that, if you see flaking, just don't do that and call someone, call the Department of Cultural Affairs. Conserving means conserving in the first place. That means don't throw away something thinking you can't conserve it or it's beyond repair. So if you have an old tanka, don't throw it away because it can be restored. But we don't ask them again to do that themselves. We just ask them to identify the problem and then call the right person. So this handbook has been used and reused. It's still in use. I'm really happy that it's still in use in Bhutan, and it's part of the conservation training policy. Now Bhutan has a fully developed Department of Cultural Affairs and a Department of Conservation. And they do workshops every year or every second year. They invite the caretakers, and but not all the caretakers, I suppose, but one per district at least. And they distribute the handbook. Now it's been digitized by Ecrum, so they don't need to print it again themselves. They can reprint them for every workshop. It's been used in workshops in the Himalayan region, even in China by my friend Sanjay Da, and it's online on the Ecrum Collegia. And it's renewable energy, so there are it has a few baby brothers or sisters. So this is a handbook that Julia Brennan and her team in Bhutan made for the object, particularly the textile objects in the temples in Bhutan. And this is a local custom-made handbook for a cave temple in Nepal, in northern Nepal, in Mustang. And this is the team of architects, heritage architects from Kathmandu, explaining to the village community their handbook image by image and how to use it. So I'm quite happy that it keeps being used and being renewed and being customized by everyone. So we come to the second example, Build Back Better. That was the Ecrum capacity building workshop in Nepal in February 2016. So you probably remember the earthquake in Nepal on 25th of April 2015. So these are the numbers. It's quite terrifying. A lot of people died, a lot more were injured, but the lives of people were affected because economically and culturally as well, and damage occurred to more than 750 cultural sites. So Ecrum was part of the first aid workshop not immediately, but very soon after the earthquake. And then they decided to organize this building capacity workshop that was based at the National Museum of Nepal in Choni, in Kathmandu. This is one of the buildings. The museum has several buildings. One of the buildings was affected by the earthquake, and that floor was on the verge of collapsing. So it was unsafe, but it was housing the Bimsen Tapak collection. So the army helped the emergency workers, and everything was housed, and that was housed wherever they could, which is in the next building, the closest one. And because there was no other place, it was housed on the floor. So that was a military collection from the General Bimsen Tapa of 19th century, and quite important for Nepal. It was not only weapons, as you will see. So this workshop was loosely based on the reorg method that Gaël de Guichin and the team at Ecrum has put together. So what it is, it comes from the idea that the collection in storage are at risk. And you have a few numbers here telling you that there is much more in storage than what's on display in the museums. And a lot of the objects that are kept in storage are not very well looked after, and they're not even safely stored. So there is a problem, and there is a need to reorganize the collection, the storage. So the answer is reorg, which is a step-by-step method and is adaptable to every sort of collection. So in that particular case, that wasn't completely a reorg method, because we didn't reorganize an existing space, but we wanted to organize a new storage in a new space that had been provided by the museum. And at the same time, we just decided that we organize the storage in a way that will be sustainable and safe for the collection. So these are the steps for reorg, and you can find that on the Ecrum website, of course. So what was the workshop for? So there was 27 participants. So everybody was working in a museum. Some museums were very big museums in Kathmandu. Some of them had been nearly entirely destroyed by the earthquake, and some of them had been barely affected. It ran over 6 days, and the collection was about 4,000 objects, but we treated 300 representative objects of every type of object in the collection. And what was the aim? That was to establish a visible storage. We discussed that with the museum, and out of this discussion came the idea of establish a visible storage. And why visible? Because it would tell the story of the collection, because it couldn't be displayed in the museum, but then it was a way of displaying it and inviting people into it, make it safe, of course, for the object. And we could attract visitors to the storage. If it was visible, that means it was well organized, and we could attract visitors and then funding. So we made this we made this poster, which was a step-by-step method as well of how to do moving this collection and how to reorganize it in a new storage. So, and we call that make a storage with a message. So the first thing is to assess the situation. So first you select the object to be moved. That was about the situation we had. Then to evaluate the documentation. Documentation is very important in a museum. And if you move objects and you don't document that, then there are the chance that you will never find them again, because no one remembers. I mean, a few years later, the person is gone and no one remembers that this object's been moved. So you evaluate in documentation and you fill the gaps in documentation. So for example, that means add the dimension if necessary, or the numbers, or put a photo if that's missing. So then you prepare a storage team. It's always good to have your team and everyone prepared, so everybody knows what they have to do and how they're going to do it. You have to create a space, a workspace for packing the collection before the move. You have to pack the object to be moved, but then you have to think, where are they going? So you have to create the same space on the other side to receive the object and to prepare a safe route to carry the object. And I will take you through the steps. Then you have to create a safe working area to receive the object and making storage boxes and do everything that's necessary before putting them in storage. Then you can implement, you can move them, and then you can tell the story. So to tell the story, you plan the storage on the paper according to the story you've chosen, and the materials you have. So we had different options, and all the participants chose one option. And then you implement. So you move the object, you put them into storage, you do what you decided to do. So I will take you now through the steps. So the first one is assess the situation. So this is what it was. So we had team groups because we were 27, so there was quite a lot of people. So we could have groups filling the gaps in documentation. Here you can see measuring the textiles. There was all military costumes and uniform. Finding a way to describe these kukuri, which are some curved swords typical of Nepal. So find a way to describe that, the different handles, and put that in the documentation. Find a way to describe as well all the rifles, pack them safely. Then you plan, you prepare, and you move. So planning means, for example, you just do around the museum and you go and you find the safest and the shortest route, and you prepare to make sure that nobody will trip, for example. So that means people carry heavy things being 2 people, but if you have a step, you just put a ramp on it. We used all the materials, so you carry on a solid or semi-rigid thing. This is the packing area, so you put some muslin in it because otherwise things will be slipping all over on the cardboard. And you put the object in it and you pack them. Not for a permanent package, but you pack them so they don't fall and they don't, get damaged during the transport. So you see the packing here with the cotton tape and muslin. So you pack, for example, 1, 2, 3. There was 3 military jackets. Yeah, we couldn't do more because otherwise they wouldn't be safe to carry them. So everything is prepared to be packed, and then you have another team which is moving them. Unfortunately, there was upstairs the new storage, so we had to do a few rehearsals to make sure that they will be able to manage the steps without falling. And on the landing, which was very big, is the receiving space. So in the receiving space, you have someone who's checking all the object against the moving form. So we had created that moving form that was missing in the museum. We had different types of packing because, as you've seen, the kukuris are very sharp. So we had these little boxes made because we didn't want people to get hurt. You have cleaning and warehousing, which occurs at that time. So we just do dry cleaning with a brush. So that was a quick things, but that was quite efficient to be able to store the object properly. We packed all the sorts because it's going to be a visible storage, so you want people to see what's in it. Because there was a long discussion about should we pack into plastic. So there are plastics which are better than others, and we decided for a polypropylene, which we could find there. It's not the ideal thing, but plastic is trapping humidity. That was the main problem. But these were metal mainly, so it doesn't contain much humidity. We packed at the dry season in Nepal, and the plastic was one of the best quality. The fact that it is transparent means that it can be monitored, and it's even an incentive to monitor the collection even more often because you know that there is a risk there, but that's what we could do. Rehousing, because all that occurred because of an earthquake, we had to find safe ways to rehouse them. So we did workshop that with all the participants to identify the risk. And one of the main risks, surprise, was earthquake, and the other one was dust. So that's why, pardon me, that's why all the things are packed to protect them from dust. And they're rehoused, you see, in foam. We just created these sort of little cradles with the foam, and everything is attached as well. So you can see here rows of swords in their rehousing. You have someone who gets the task of putting a label on each object. These are the shelves that we had made in Nepal. We used lateral thinking, which is, we didn't have a big budget and we wanted to use only materials that were available locally. And we didn't want to waste. So you reuse all the material, sometimes 2 times, sometimes 3 times. So the cardboard was used to carry the object, but it was used, excuse me, also for the final storage, but because it could be slippery, we used, can you see that, this green thing? This is some foam that we can find very easily in Kathmandu because these are trekking mats, I mean, or yoga mats, that will be more or less the same thing. So we used that, so we could put that on the shelf under the cardboard so it wouldn't slip. And we didn't have enough of that, otherwise we would have used that all the time. So there were strips of yoga mat at regular intervals under the cardboard, and to make sure all the swords and knives were sort of threaded with cotton tape into the cardboard. We recycled all the materials, so when we finished the foam, we finished doing the cradle with the foam, we used all the leftovers to do padded, and the leftovers of muslin as well to do padded hangers for the uniforms. And then we had someone coming to tell the story. So this is Mr. Anil Chitrika, who is a Nepalese historian, and this is Yamuna Maharjan, who was the curator of that particular collection. And they were telling the story of the kukuri. And you can see the kukuri is here, even on the shoulder decoration of the uniforms. And everybody decided to tell the story object by object. And this is Nilam Pradhananga, who helped us a lot there. She's an architect. And she was in charge of the logistic and the follow-up of the project. So she's planning the storage with all the participants and with the team which was in charge for that. So that the story went like that. You had an object and we decided, they described it and they say key points about the story of that object. And so we had these racks, for example, for the rifles. So you could see the rifles and you could see their story here. And here you could see some selected kukuris with the story of the kukuri here, and the rest of them were here. That gives an idea, visible storage gives an idea as well of how many objects are in the collections of what is in a museum. There is more than meets the eye. For the uniforms, we had some envelopes done by the local tailor with the muslin we used before to pack. And this is as well an illustration of what's there and what's the story of that. And this is the opening day. And Mimi Pradhan, the curator of the Bimson Taba collection, who is giving a tour to people. Here you can see Christian Manhart, who is the head of UNESCO Nepal. And that was quite a big success. And after a year, with everybody in the museum working on it, assisted by Nilam, the entire collection moved into the new storage. And this is a view of the collection in the visible storage there. So that all these people need to be congratulated, really, because they've done fantastic work. So I just have a little bit of time to talk to you that will be shorter about what we did in the Philippines for the Art Count Forum. So you may remember that in 2016 there was an earthquake and a hurricane in the Philippines. So this is the church, or what's left of the church, in the island of Bohol, in the southern part of the Philippines. And this is a very religious community. So the church is an incredibly important place for them. So immediately they had, immediately or soon after, they had a temporary church built next to that, which is basically a roof with no walls, but a roof with benches and everything, so you can have the ceremonies. So during the forum, we decided to work with the community to all the collections, and everything that was in the church was stored all over the place, sometimes in the new temporary church, sometimes in the vicar's house, sometimes in people's houses, in any. So the community wanted a little bit of help to store the things better. So these are the participants to the forum. So some of them are conservators, some of them are University of Melbourne students, some of them are members of the local community. And we made different teams in 3 different villages. And they worked for a few hours visiting the site and collecting information. And then over 2 days, they worked in the evening after the forum, after the communication, the conference. And on the 3rd day, they presented their findings. So the method was the preservation needs assessment, which is basically these steps. You assess the existing things, the room, the building, what's the environment where the collection is. You assess the existing maintenance procedures, if there are any, the collection, in which condition it is, what it is made of, and how is it displayed, what's the visitor impact, and you provide recommendation to improve all that, the collection preservation. So that was, of course, it's not an in-depth study, but that gives you an idea. So this is the village of Antequera, where I was with the team. So this is the church, the state of the church. So it was not too bad, meaning the building was still up. But inside the church, you can see it's not fantastic. So some of the statues were still left in the church. Some were in the temporary church that you can see here, which is basically a roof on columns. And some were protected, some were not. And this is the 2 ladies who are in charge and know where everything is, more or less, and really take care of the collection. This is Miguel, who was the voice of our team. And this is what different team came up afterwards. So Antequera was 1 village, but there was 2 others. So it can take different forms. So there was the description of the collection. So the statues are here in the temporary church. The carrots, which are used to carry the saints during the processions, were stored somewhere else. They were still in the church, actually, because they were too big to be anywhere else. What's the story of the collection? Why is this one important? Where did it come from? Where is it? So you see where it was in many different places. And these are the type of recommendation that came. So it could be of different forms. Of course, this team chose bullet points and to concentrate as well on what's active, what's preventive, and how long it takes. So being very practical. Some other teams made it in a table form. It doesn't really matter as long as it's efficient and you can read it. You can see a few of the recommendations: block open the grills, sort of, because there were just grills on the side, so it wasn't really closed. Document the thing, relocate some objects, immediately covers those who are not covered, treat the pest infested images because they will contaminate the rest, and a sort of timeline of how long it will take to do that and what it needs. So this one needs seeking the permission, the other one needs documentation, and it needs a National Museum permission and help. Creation of a storage needs funding. So just to give you an idea of simple things that can be done, and with the help of the community, and when the community is involved, it works much better. So in conclusion, I hope I haven't been too long, but I can say that, as I said in the beginning, the prevention can be practiced at all levels of the community, really. It's not only conservators. People are always thinking that they can't do anything because they are not specialists, but everybody can do a little bit of work. And working in shared capacity with the community is absolutely essential if you want to do something which is valuable and sustainable. You need to adapt your methodology to specific contexts. So I showed you a few things, but you can think of other things, the handbooks, but you can have leaflets, you can have posters, you can have working sheets, you can do some material for school children, you can think of other things, you can have, of course, digital things. And all that is made to building community capacity in preventive conservation, which is the key to sustainability in conservation. And I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sabine. Thank you very much. We have a question, so with your permission, I'll just take it up. Question is from Nick Boyce. How did the Norwegian Ministry of Climate and Environment come to be involved in the Nepalese project?
That was, so he picked that on the, so that was in Nepal, yeah? They gave funding, I think, yeah. I was not involved in finding the funding.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Norwegian, that probably means that this was one of the main source of funding.
Okay. Thank you. Any other question?
Because when you go on the poster, if you go back on the poster we did, there's at the bottom of the poster, there is all the Smithsonian, the Norwegian Ministry, Ecrum, UNESCO, so that's all the people who participated giving money. Yeah.
Okay. Any other question? No, Sabine, I don't see any questions. I think everything was very clear and everybody liked the little drawings. I love illustrations of the little monks. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, well, that came because I like drawing, and then because I just think you communicate so much better with drawings than with words. I mean, to start with, not everyone can read, but everyone can see a drawing. And if you make the drawing talk, more or less, there is a better chance of being understood. So it's really visual communication. We really wanted to do something user-friendly, and people relate much more to drawings than to, big books.
I had a small question. It's just that in the Nepal project that you did, the earthquake thing, what is the thumb rule for selecting materials when you have to do a salvage or emergency storage thing, and conservation grade material is not readily available? And also, funding is a choice. So what is the thumb rule for selecting materials as an alternative?
Well, yeah, that was always the question. So we had only 1 week to prepare, and then 6 days workshop. So we've been running madly around Kathmandu for a week trying to find. You have to settle what's the best available, and because if you don't use something which is locally available, it's not replicable. People can't make it. So you can always import very expensive and safe materials, but that won't be of any help because people won't be able to replicate that. So you have to settle for the next best thing. And there is always something you have to scratch a bit your head. I mean, muslin you can find everywhere. It takes a bit of time to find muslin which is not printed because we didn't want the ink to bleed when it's humid. So we just go and find the best chiffon or something which is light, which is cotton, which is, and well, it's always funny to try to explain to a textile, in a textile shop that you want the best chiffon, but you don't want any print. And they say, but I mean, the print will do so much better for you for a sari. But say, no, it's not for a sari, it's just the wrapping things. But you always manage to find things. Plastic is not always that bad. I mean, you don't find any odd plastic, you try to find the best one. And then, as I said, we considered that was better than not wrapping the things. And we just, we didn't wrap everything, of course, in plastic, but only the things that had a low content of humidity or next to zero, because there was mainly metal. And we decided that, of course, if there is any humidity, it could cause rust. So that's a cause of a good incentive for the curators to really regularly monitor things for that. And plastic being transparent, you don't need to unwrap the object to see the condition. So it works both ways, because there is always a risk when you have a perfect storage that you think it's perfect, so you don't go and visit it, and you think everything is fine. So when you know it's not completely perfect, then you check a
Yeah.
bit more regularly. Yeah. So
Yeah. Thank you. We have a question. It says, often in museums and heritage sites, mostly visitors are restricted to touch or interact with the exhibit physically by the staff in order to avoid any possible damage. However, does explaining the public rather than restricting them hold a greater possibility when it comes to preserving our heritage?
I totally agree. Yeah, I think, I mean, one of the best thing would be if you had one object that people could touch, and that could, for example, that could be a replica. I mean, if you don't want them to touch the original thing, you could make a replica. A tailor could make one of the costume, and you can even have school children, trying on the jackets. If you have a modern one made, but following the pattern of the old one, and that helps people to engage more with the collection. And if you can't have people touching them, then you have to find other ways for them to engage with it. So that's why we had these little sheets with the photos and the story of the objects, so they could identify a bit more and connect a bit more with the object, because it is their story after all, but it needs to be made available to them. So you have to be conservators need to be creative, yeah, to find ways for people to engage with the collection, not only to preserve the physical object, but to find ways to engage as well.
So thank you, Sabine. Thank you so very much for doing the talk. A very interesting talk. I think these were comprehensive, and that's why I think we got very little questions. But thank you for taking out the time and putting up such a wonderful presentation. It was a pleasure hearing the case studies. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. So I think that's for today. Bye, Sabine.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.